Reported today in The Verge. Twitter might have a better read on floods than NOAA. Frustrated tweets led scientists to believe that tidal floods along the east coast and Gulf Coast of the U.S. are more annoying than official tide gauges suggest. 500,000 geotagged tweets showed researchers that people were talking about disruptively high waters even when government gauges hadn't recorded tide levels high enough to be considered a flood. Capturing these reactions on social media can help authorities better understand and address the more subtle, insidious ways that climate change is playing out in people's daily lives. Coastal flooding is becoming a bigger problem as sea levels rise, but a study published recently in the journal Nature Communications suggests that officials aren't doing a great job of recording that. The Verge spoke with Frances Moore, lead author of the new study and a professor at the University of California, Davis. This isn't the first time that she's turned to Twitter for her climate research. Her previous research also found that people tend to stop reacting to unusual weather after dealing with it for a while, sometimes in as little as 2 years. Similar data from Twitter has been used to study how people coped with earthquakes and hurricanes. This interview has been lightly edited for length and clarity. Why were you interested in studying coastal flooding? We're trying to get at some of the negative effects of climate change that are widespread but not necessarily disastrous. They're having these negative consequences across large populations, they're interrupting people's daily lives, they're annoying, they're causing some damage, maybe not a huge amount. Those types of impacts are pretty important, even though any individual one is not necessarily particularly dramatic. That type of pervasive and chronic nuisance flooding that is just getting worse and worse and worse over time as people are trying to go about their daily lives is something that we're interested in understanding. Why did you turn to Twitter? It's an interesting source of data to complement the more standard measures that come from tide gauges that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration puts up to measure tide heights. If you have enough data, then you can kind of get a very fine resolution of where this flooding is happening. Whereas the tide gauges, you might have maybe one in a county typically. The main reason I like Twitter as a source of data is that it integrates not just a measure of typical exposure, which is did the water come onto the land in a place where it wasn't supposed to be. It combines that typical exposure with a measure of social consequences. If the water is where it shouldn't be, but it's in a place where there aren't any people and there aren't any roads, that's really different from that same move. For more on this story, visit the news article link.